My name's Sean Maher. I was born and raised in the Bay Area. I've been through a whole range of careers I wanted to try out in the last several years. I've been working on getting into journalism. I've been through the journalism school at SF State. I edited the paper there for a little while, and once I got out of that, I got into like a once a week kind of internship at the Oakland Tribune. And that was up until I graduated, and that was back in May. And since then I've been doing sort of an ongoing freelancing gig for them, trying to break my way into the industry just as it crumbles. It's an interesting time. I'm jumping onto what looks like a sinking ship, but it's also a really kind of exciting time. There's a lot more people looking for news than ever have. I think it's really exciting that young people are actually consuming news in an increasing rate, which seemed like as I was growing up, it was like young people don't read, young people don't care about what's going on, and it seems like that's turning around. So if the business of it crumbles, at least I know there's an audience out there, which is kind of exciting while I'm trying to break into this.
How did you learn about Spot Us?
My editor actually brought it to me. We've been working on ways, it's very hard for me to make a whole lot of money doing what I'm doing. I'm sort of at below subsistence level at the moment. And he said that the Tribune was working on kind of checking out Spot Us, and there's more and more buzz about the site and what you guys are trying to do, sort of an alternative model to how journalism can get funded, and suggested that we sort of collaborate with the site on a project.
What could you tell us about your story? And
well, it started It started smaller than what I think it is now. We wanted to look at potholes in the city. As you're driving around, especially in a city like Oakland, which is old, it's one of the older cities in the area. It's completely built out, and it's especially urban. It's a very high traffic area. As you drive around, you see a lot of crumbled down, busted up streets. You hit potholes on your way off the freeway. And as I was looking into that, I kept finding that the problem was larger and larger. The public works agency that is supposed to be in charge of repairing potholes and among several other things has a number of supervisor positions that are just empty. One of them being the person in charge of roadway maintenance. And I talked to them there. I've spoken with them some, and it's all really an issue of budget. They're as everybody is dealing with an economic crisis that's striking everything. So as positions empty up, they pretty much just have to do more with less. They've got supervisors handling a much broader range of problems at this point. How far do you want me to do the whole thing now? Or?
Well, sure. Just talk about how much reporting you've done, and where you foresee the story going, and.
Well, what it comes down to at the moment is that I spoke with an engineer for the city who's kind of in charge of how they're using their resources to deal with the problems of Oakland streets. And what it looks like from their end right now is they've tried really hard to come up with more effective ways of spending the money that they do have. But even with the best possible scenario that they've been able to lay out, Oakland streets are getting worse and there's no way out. At the funding level that they're at, they've tried to make several changes to how they use their resources, but there seems at this point to be no way to stop the bleeding. One of the problems is that for years, the way that they dealt with fixing city streets was reactive. They dealt with the worst streets first. Somebody calls up, says, "Oh, my street's in complete disrepair. It's completely awful." Chronicle Watch puts them on sort of on everybody's radar, anything like that. City supervisors, council members who want to bring a lot of attention to their district, make it a big issue. Anything that puts pressure on them to fix the worst streets first, they reacted to for the last 20 years or so. The problem is that when you spend all of your resources doing that, you get a very low return on the money that you're investing. If you want to invest a certain amount of money to repair a street that's in just god-awful condition, you're going to spend, let's say, $10 per foot. Whereas if you're going to do preventative maintenance on streets that are already in good condition, you spend much, much, much less. The problem being is that as we've spent almost all of our resources fixing the worst streets first, we've gotten more and more worse and worse streets. And as that problem gets worse, fixing it becomes more and more exponentially expensive. So they're trying to do now this new model of spending that they actually took from LA last year, whereby they're going to try to do more preventative maintenance. And that still doesn't seem to be, all it does is slow the bleeding. Things are still continuing to get worse and worse. Oakland already has some of the worst streets in the Bay Area, and I think we need to look at a way out of that. I think at least people need to know about it. I think there needs to be a really rich public discussion about it. What happens on city streets is not an especially sexy subject. I mean, this isn't going to be as good as a homicide package, or looking at police abuses or things like that. It's also a much more gradual issue than what you generally see covered. I think that's a big part of why you haven't seen much of this in the news, is that it's not one day you wake up and there's a big event that everyone's going to come to a protest for, or there's a big there's a big news release about it. But it is the kind of thing that needs to be covered. It needs to be covered soon. Why it needs to be covered soon is, for one, in particular, this time of year is important to what happens to city streets. We've been seeing a lot of rain. We've been seeing a lot of weather that is actually really, really rough on city streets. As rain comes down, it goes underneath existing levels of concrete and actually loosens it, which is why you're going to start seeing a lot more potholes in the next few weeks than you may have noticed before. At the same time, the federal stimulus package that just got recently passed is one of the things that's in there includes a certain amount of money for infrastructure. The problem with that being, and it's not necessarily a problem, but it makes it an urgent issue, is that the turnaround time to get prepared to receive those funds, all the reports that the city engineers and public works need to put together, all the kinds of things that they need to do to prepare, they have to do in the next 3 months, which they usually have a year to do. So what's happening right now is actually going to have a pretty big impact on how we're able to handle maintaining our city streets for the next several years.
Great. Any last words for people and why they should support the story?
I mean, I think why this is a particularly good, important venue for supporting this kind of a story is, again, it's not the kind of thing that is it's not a daily piece. And as newspapers and other news agencies are finding themselves with fewer and fewer resources, it's very difficult to invest in something that's not this happened yesterday, or this is happening today. This is it's a longer term issue, and it's going to be very difficult, I think, for local television and radio and websites and newspapers to invest in a story like this. So I think a venue like Spot Us is really important for funding stories that aren't necessarily going to grab every headline.